It is officially official. UFC 303, McGregor versus Chandler is no longer, and now it is UFC 303, Pereira versus Prochazka 2. And what a fight. I still think is going to be really fun. Is it bad news overall? I would say yes. Hearing that Conor McGregor is officially out of the fight is a big shame. It was the biggest story over the last week or so. Of course, Ariel Helwani really did drag it out for a long time, and it turned out that he was correct. But I feel like when it comes to that stuff, I'll talk about that just a little bit later on in the video. To announce what was announced, Pereira versus Prochazka 2 is now the official main event of UFC 303. The official co-main event is now Brian Ortega taking on Diego Lopes, and lower down on the main card on the Tapology order is what was originally the co-main event, but Jamahal Hill is now officially out injured with a knee injury, and Carlos Ulberg is going to be fighting Anthony Smith. So I'm going to give my opinions and predictions for every single individual fight a little bit later on in the video, as I did just kind of want to talk about the situation of the whole card. It's big news. I mean, we kind of were hearing reports that it was looking negative that McGregor was in or he was out. I'm sure the UFC isn't very happy with Ariel Helwani kind of constantly saying that he's out, because I'm sure they probably were trying to scramble in the background, trying to put things together to make this card as big as it possibly could be to kind of soften the blow. But yeah, Ariel Helwani was right all along. Unfortunately, McGregor is out. Now they have replaced the fight completely with Pereira versus Prochazka, which is still a fantastic fight. It is just worth noting, though, that it isn't as big as McGregor versus Chandler. But in truth, there's probably not much more the UFC really could have done, because yeah, I mean, McGregor versus Chandler's would have been the biggest fight of the year, of course. Now, the co-main event is Ortega versus Lopes. They've called up Ortega and Lopes, I guess, to potentially save the card. And I believe they've probably promised both guys a title shot for doing this, as they have accepted ranked opponents, dangerous ranked opponents for both guys, on short notice. I believe this card is only like 2.5 weeks away. So getting two ranked guys to agree to fight each other without a camp, there's got to be some sort of incentive there, I'm sure, financial and also title shot wise as well. And then, of course, Smith is now stepping in for Ulberg. I like the fight. It just unfortunately isn't as big as what Ulberg versus Jamahal Hill was going to be, because if Ulberg knocked out Jamahal Hill and called out Alex Pereira, they really could have sold a City Kickboxing versus Alex Pereira fight, you know. But hey, I'm looking forward to that fight too. You know, I'm from New Zealand, so I do have a lot of fanship. I'm a fan of Carlos Ulberg, is kind of where I was getting to. Now let's talk about the fights as they were. Pereira versus Prochazka. I do want to say this right now. Don't, for some reason people will do this, do not get angry at Alex Pereira or Jiri Prochazka for this, because they haven't done anything to this. I just know how MMA works, and people get angry at the wrong people for the wrong things. It's no one's fault at the end of the day. If McGregor's injured, he's injured. Injuries do happen. It is just a shame that it did have to happen on the biggest card. But Pereira and Prochazka have done not only the UFC a favour, saving the pay-per-view, they've also done the fans a favour as well, because they're still giving us a championship level fight on 2.5 weeks notice. And Alex Pereira right now is one of the top pound for pound guys, because he has become a champion in 2 different weight classes, one of the biggest names in the UFC. And so is Jiri. Jiri's got a big fan base. Everyone loves Jiri. So shout out to both of these guys first of all for taking the championship fight on 2.5 weeks notice. That is crazy from both guys. To talk about the fight though, it is a rematch. We have seen the first fight play out with a somewhat controversial stoppage, which is why I do think that the UFC was quite open to the idea of doing the rematch, just because it wasn't like a conclusive finish. Some people do argue that Jiri could have come back and all of this and that. Now, Jiri originally said that he was knocked out, and then he said that he wasn't knocked out, but I'm hyped for the rematch, man. Let's not really worry about the first fight too much. Since then, both guys have had great performances. I thought that overall as a fight, Rakic versus Prochazka was the most fun fight on UFC 300. I know people will disagree with me on that, but overall throughout the fight, that individual fight brought me the most excitement on that card. I loved that fight. It was so fun. And then Alex Pereira, since then, after knocking out Jiri, did knock out the former champion in Jamahal Hill. So overall, 2 very impressive performances from both guys actually on the same card, now that I think about it a little bit more. I'm looking forward to this fight a lot, you know, because I know it's just going to be fun. Now, the thing is with Alex Pereira, he's not going to match the craziness of Jiri Prochazka on the feet. Jiri is probably the most crazy fighter on the roster when it comes to his fighting style. He just runs forward and just doesn't really have the best defense. Now, of course, originally everyone's like, man, his head movement's crazy. He actually doesn't have very good defense, and his striking technique isn't even that good either. It's actually nuts how good he is, just because he's got such an awkward style. Like, he's throwing punches from his hips, so most people don't expect punches to come from that area of the body. It's actually just kind of crazy how his whole style actually works and how he's had so much success doing it. Of course, the former champion, both guys champions in some way or another. Jiri being a former champion at light heavyweight, Alex being the current light heavyweight champion, former middleweight champion. This is probably the biggest fight they could have done. I don't think there's really anything else they could have done unless they tried to really make some weird things happen that probably would have been impossible. This is the biggest fight I think that they could have done. And then to kind of further soften the blow, they've added Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopes to the card as well. And as I said in the intro, I do think that this is probably going to be a title eliminator, just fully considering the fact that it's a short notice matchup, really, honestly. Unless they want to do Diego Lopes versus Movsar Evloev 2, which I'm very open to seeing. I would love to see that fight. I like the fight a lot. I did talk about it briefly in my Saudi Arabia video when we just got the new main event for that. I like Lopes in the fight, though, I do. Lopes is a guy that I'm convinced Diego Lopes is the most powerful guy at 145 pounds. His fight against Sadiq Yusuff proved that to me. He is absolutely massive for the weight class. It's an absolute miracle he managed to make weight against Evloev on 5 days notice. That just tells you that this guy is always in shape. And Diego Lopes is so powerful on the feet. I think he's going to give Ortega problems on the feet. And if the fight does get down to the ground and in the grappling, Lopes is no slouch on the ground either. He's a very, very talented grappler in his own right as well. Now, Ortega just beat Yair Rodriguez in what was probably the best performance of his career after spending quite a bit of time off with that injury and then a little bit of a break before that after the loss to Volk. I thought his boxing looked really good. I thought his striking looked rapidly improved. Lopes isn't the most technical striker at all. If you do watch his... Well, the thing is, you can't really watch his recent fights because he has made rapid improvements in his career. It's unbelievable how much better this guy is getting, and so quickly. He just must not have been training full-time before he got to the UFC. That's kind of the only thing I can think of. But, man, this guy's getting good. If you watch his older fights, he's very sloppy, very open. Isn't really as sloppy or open as he is now, but he still is probably somewhat hittable against the right striker. But I feel like it would take someone like Max Holloway, Arnold Allen, or even Ilia Topuria to kind of expose that sort of weakness, just because he's got that power and that threat on the feet. I like Lopes. I think Lopes knocks him out, man. I do like the fact, I really respect the fact that Ortega and both Lopes have taken this fight, of course. And I definitely probably have to respect Ortega more for the matchup, because Ortega's the number 3 ranked guy in the division. I think Lopes is number 11 in the UFC. So yeah, Ortega really putting a lot on the line here, so a lot of respect to him, a lot of respect to Ortega and Lopes. Both guys taking the fight on short notice. Love to see it, honestly, you do. So, yeah, I do like Lopes in the fight, though. I think Lopes is going to win. It's also worth noting as well that this guy is in shape. He is a coach. I mean, he's Alexa Grasso's... I don't know if he's Alexa Grasso's head coach, but he's a big-time coach for Grasso. You see him in the corner of a lot of her fights. You see him in the corner of a lot of fights. I don't know if it is Lobo Gym. It might be Lobo Gym. And you see him in the corner of a lot of fighters' fights. And then, of course, we have Ulberg now fighting Smith. Now, somewhat of an interesting situation. Ulberg was originally going to step up on short notice to fight against Jamahal Hill, and now Jamahal Hill is injured, so in steps in Anthony Smith. I'm actually really happy that they found a replacement. I kind of worried a little bit that what they were going to do was say, oh, hey, Hill's out, Ulberg isn't really the biggest name in the world, because let's be honest, he isn't really. Like, he's a pretty big name, but he's not... I feel like Jamahal Hill was the A side big time in that fight, right? And they were just kind of going to forget about him and not like give him a fight, but no, they got it. And Anthony Smith steps up. Now, I'm not really the biggest Anthony Smith fan. I'm going to be open and honest. I think he says some silly things. Mainly what he says. I don't really mind his fighting style, aside from the fact that he can be a little bit odd in there. I think Ulberg is going to beat him, though. Now, the thing is, it's actually not an easy matchup for him, because if Smith does go to that grappling, which he is an elite grappler for 205 pounds, he could give Ulberg a lot of problems, because we actually haven't seen Ulberg's grappling in the UFC. We've only really seen striking, and aside from his debut, he's looked really... Oh, actually, against his fight against Fabio Charant, he looked a bit terrible as well. But aside from that, maybe it was tough on Nchukwi. Or maybe he fought Fabio... Did he fight Fabio Charant and then tough on Nchukwi back to back? He did. Never mind. Aside from like maybe the first few fights in the UFC where he didn't look that good, I think that he's made rapid improvements and he's looking really good. It is worth noting his last fight lasted 12 seconds, so can't really take too much from that. But he's an elite kickboxer, a multiple-time King of the Ring champion, which is a kickboxing tournament in, I believe it's in New Zealand, but they could also do it internationally in Australia as well. But that is a big time kickboxing tournament. There are a lot of very good kickboxers in New Zealand. Navajo Sterling actually fights tonight, the day of me recording this, for Hex, and if he wins, he's probably going to get signed to the UFC. Similar background to Ulberg. Looking forward to it. Shout out to Navajo Sterling. He's fighting Sam K, former PFL fighter, I should say, sorry, tonight. But anyway, yeah, I think that Ulberg is going to knock out Smith. Now, just to kind of end off the video, I think I covered everything relatively quickly in 11 minutes. This wasn't like a massive shock to me. And to be fully truthful and open with you guys, I was actually told yesterday that McGregor was out. But I was told something else. I was told that Chandler had a replacement opponent. So that's why the Pereira versus Prochazka matchup is a bit of a shock to me, but the idea of Conor being out isn't so much. Now I understand that Ariel Helwani was posting and kind of teasing everyone, and he probably did feel like he was the guy letting the public know what was going on behind the scenes, because no one was speaking. The UFC were dead silent about it. They didn't want anyone to know. And I think what the UFC were trying to do was they were scrambling behind the scenes, trying to find a fight to replace the McGregor fight, and maybe even add some more like Ortega Lopes, and maybe even add another one or something like that. Maybe promote Michael Page versus Ian Gary to a 5-round fight. Just kind of trying to do stuff like that to soften the blow of McGregor being out, because I think this is going to probably be a bigger deal than it might just seem like, oh, McGregor's out, we just replaced a few fights. It's worth noting, this is on International Fight Week, so a little bit of a nightmare, because this is a really, really big event. This isn't just the fight, you know, they have events and fighter meet and greets and merchandise and performances and all this sort of stuff leading up to the event. And people have paid thousands of dollars for tickets to go to this UFC 303 event, as well as the meet and greets and all of that. And now, I know Alex Pereira is a superstar, I know so is Jiri, and Ortega versus Lopes is a great fight. It's not the same fight as McGregor versus Chandler. And I feel like at the end of the day as well, you know, those tickets that were selling for thousands of dollars just to get into the arena, would people have paid thousands of dollars to go to this card, aside from the Conor McGregor card? I'm going to say no on that one. So yeah, it's a very tough little situation to kind of go through. Maybe they do refunds, maybe they give back like 50% off the tickets. I don't know, man, but it's a kind of a tough situation overall. Overall, this card is really good, but it really was still built around the fact of Conor McGregor being that guy. And you know it's a McGregor card, because what they do in all of these cards is they put potential superstars on the prelims. Peyton Talbot on the prelims for a reason. Maybe they think that Gene Silva could be marketable. Charles Jourdain's already a likable guy. Potentially an Andrei Arlovski retirement fight here. Vinicius Oliveira. I'm tired, guys. I'm sorry. I slept 5 hours last night and just had a solid mechanics exam literally 3 hours ago. Vinicius Oliveira could be a superstar, just with his fighting style. Honestly, he didn't look that good on his Contender Series or UFC fight, but he's a good fighter. Rei Saruya, I know they're both from Japan, and they're both flyweights, but Rei Saruya literally is a younger Tatsuro Taira. He could also be a superstar. So they've kind of loaded up the card with guys, and maybe a Cub Swanson retirement fight as well. So they've really loaded the card with specific fights to make the matchups. I wouldn't be surprised if we see another fight added. Honestly, I don't think that we're going to get another ranked fight, but I think that you could honestly half expect just another fight to be added to the card. Make it a 14-fight card. It's not going to soften the blow. any more than McGregor versus Chandler. I'm going to refresh Big Marcel's Instagram here and see if we've got anything new. That's it. That's all of the news. I did a video about Saudi Arabia. I'm going to be doing my PFL predictions, UFC predictions this weekend as well. Let me know what you think in the comments of this situation. There's a lot going on, and I'll see you guys in the next one.